morning. Thank you so much for having us this morning at the second day of Warsaw Security Forum. It's great to see you all, colleagues and friends from security and defense community in Warsaw in person, finally, after so many months. And I hope we will have an excellent discussion to kick off the second day of what has already been an excellent Warsaw Security Forum 2021. Let me begin with Radoslava Stefanova, head of NATO Ballistic Missile Defense Section. Before I ask you a specific question, I would like to broadly paint a situational awareness picture, because we need to stick very much to the threat environment, to the situation that we've got in our region, because we are about to speak from the perspective of NATO Eastern Flank. Just weeks ago, we've been watching very closely the events in Russia and Belarus linked to the Zapad 21 exercise. And of course, you've been sitting on Russia desk at NATO for many years before you moved to a ballistic missile defense section. I wonder if there was anything in the Zapad 21 exercise scenario or events that happened actually on the ground that made you wonder about Russia's capabilities in terms of ballistic missile and other aerial threats that we're faced on the side of NATO.
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious forum. It's my pleasure to join you in Warsaw, and thank you also for getting the chance to be on a panel with such distinguished panelists. To your question, I know you want me to talk about Zapad. And I can talk to you about Zapad for a while, but not necessarily in the context of integrated air and missile defense. We have issues with Zapad mostly because the Russians lie. They've lied before and they continue to lie, and they haven't reported the number of troops, which is contrary to what their own defense ministry declared to their press about the number of troops. That number was in August announced to be 200,000. That warrants mandatory observation, something that Russia has never done under the Vienna document, and it's part of the problem that we have also in the context of the broader missile challenge coming from Russia. But Zapad per se is not a challenge to us in the sense that we didn't see there anything that we didn't already expect to see, and we haven't factored in our decision making, not only in the context of integrated air and missile defense, but also in the context of our broader defense and deterrence, of which integrated air and missile defense is an essential part, but only a part. It's one part. I would just remind the audience of the appropriate mix, where nuclear and conventional capabilities have as much role to play as integrated air and missile defense. Yes, we did see some launches. We expected to see that much. As I said, our biggest problem is the fact that Russia doesn't abide by international law. In particular, it has undermined all conventional and non-arms control regimes, and then that's partly why we're so concerned. And that also led to the demise of the INF Treaty, including the deployment of the SSC-8 missile, which is, of course, of our concern. It's now deployed in places like Kaliningrad, Crimea. So that is the problem that we have. It's broader than Zapad.
Seen from Brussels' perspective and NATO's HQ, the eastern flank seems to be quite vulnerable to the Russian missile attack. But NATO, of course, is making progress in terms of rearming or actually implementing the air and missile defense systems across the eastern flank, and actually developments are happening as we speak. Just yesterday, the Czech Republic has signed a significant contract to acquire a Shorted system. A month ago, we've heard a statement from the Polish MOD to develop a modern Shorted system. A few years back, we had the decision from the Baltic states to jointly acquire a shored system. So given all that, and again, from NATO's perspective, where are we in terms of filling the gaps in air and missile defense on the eastern flank?
All right, so the eastern flank is, of course, fundamental to our defense because it's closest geographically to Russia and the challenges that we're facing there, including, in fact, the growing missile challenges. And I can talk about them also in some detail if you like. But I just also wanted to put that in perspective. The challenges that we face from Russia are not only from the eastern flank. In fact, we discussed yesterday that Russia has deployed increasingly offensive missile platforms, not just on the eastern flank. It's in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea. It's resumed the long-haul strategic bomber sorties over the North Atlantic. It's a challenge at 360 degrees all around our population and territory. For that reason, in fact, integrated air and missile defense is an essential mission that is also at 360 degrees, aimed at all air and missile threats to NATO. So, and I would also mention that we also, aside from Russia, which is undoubtedly our greatest challenge at the current time, we also face other challenges, including from state and non-state actors that we also need to take into account, and that accounts for the essence of the mission, which is at 360 degrees. And we have taken, over the last several years, in particular after the demise of the INF Treaty, some significant steps to reinforce that mission. And by that I mean in terms of decision-making, streamlining, including our operational plans, as well as capabilities. You know, a number of allies, and you mentioned that already, have already been acquiring the appropriate capabilities. But here I would like to also make one additional point. It's not just about missile defense. It's also, even if not even more so, about detection, tracking, surveillance, intelligence, reconnaissance, fundamental capabilities, and of course, command and control, which is the value added that NATO brings to the table. So it's not so much about geography anymore, given the nature of the threat. It's about having the right mix of capabilities at the right time, and at the right location. And that is what we've been working on, integrating all of that. And one last point I wanted to make is what I mentioned earlier. So, of course, it's about defense, but it's also about deterrence. And by that I mean certain threats are to be defended from, and certain other threats need to be deterred. And for that we need to use a mix of offensive and defensive capabilities. And they need to be seamlessly integrated. And air and missile defense is one part of this broader picture, and I think that's a very important point.
And this is exactly what I would like to ask you in the final first part of my questions to you, is what does integrated air and missile defense means to you and to NATO? I will ask a question to all the rest of the panelists, because this is the key word, and also it stands out in the title of the panel. It does not only need to be integrated within the air and missile defense system, but also outside of it.
You're completely right, and at the core of this concept is the notion of jointness. Jointness in terms of multi-domain operation, jointness in terms of capabilities, and especially and above all in terms of command and control and decision-making. Of course, integrated air and missile defense may mean different things to different people. If you talk to engineers, they will tell you about a layered architecture and system. If you talk to operational planners, they will want to see an integrated plan of the nature that I just described earlier. If you talk to policy people like myself, we would like to see a seamless decision-making process. All of these things are important, and all of that means integration. And this is what we've been working on, in particular over the last several years, to bring NATO integrated air and missile defense to the front, so that it has the same place as the other components of the appropriate mix, overall in defense and deterrence.
Radoslava, thank you for this, start of our conversation. We will continue also with the questions from the audience. Let me now switch to our second international guest, Lieutenant General retired Ben Hodges, great friend of Warsaw Security Forum and great friend of Poland. Ben, it's so good to have you again with us. You've been advocating for years, not only for the countries to have to enhance their air and missile defense capabilities, but also for the commanders in NATO and outside NATO, in the U.S. Army that you've been leading in Europe for a few years ago, to have it very high on the agenda, if not, at the highest point of agenda. A few years back, we were all very concerned about the perspective of a military attack on NATO eastern flank. We've adopted some measures. What has been the result of these measures in terms of air and missile defense?
Marek, thank you. So I do believe that air missile defense is the #1 vulnerability that we have in Europe today. Of all the types of threats and challenges, I think we are most vulnerable in this, not because people have not been working on it, but because it is so complicated and it requires an integrated approach, multinational approach, and it involves civilian leadership. This is not something just for military commanders and units. This is about protecting European citizens. It's not about protecting the U.S. base at Ramstein or in Povets or down at MK in Romania. This is about protecting European citizens. And if the Russians are going to roll the dice and launch a strike into Europe because they see an opportunity or for whatever reason, then for sure they are not going to be reluctant to unleash salvos of all types of missiles, rockets, hypersonic weapons. And of course, this would all be accompanied by fixed-wing aircraft and swarms of drones going after all of our sensors. So it will be a comprehensive attack when it happens. And that's why I feel that even though nations are purchasing Patriot, we're doing a lot of work in different areas, it hasn't been fully integrated into a permanent network of sensors, shooters, and command decision-making that gets practiced routinely. And that would be my #1 plea today, is that all of you put pressure on our alliance and on the United States and on your own government to demand a theater-wide, multinational, integrated air and missile defense exercise that ties together all of these things. I mean, imagine the context in which this would happen. There would be barrages of cyber attacks trying to disrupt all of our systems. For sure, some of these rockets, some of these drones would get through and take out sensors, so we would have gaps. So do we have the resilience to absorb damage and still be able to protect European citizens, but also to protect our ability to reinforce? That means, obviously, airports, seaports, airfields, throughout. That's what this is about. And I would say one component of this that doesn't get talked about as much is, do we have to sit back and wait to be hit? I mean, what can we do left of launch? I'm an infantry officer, was, And I grew up believing in the importance of initiative, not let the enemy decide everything and then you react. What can we do without being provocative, because our civilian leadership will have their foot on the brake from start to finish, but how can we get the initiative left of launch? That might mean non-kinetic means, but it also could mean a preemptive kinetic strike. And I think that the Kremlin needs to know that we have the ability to do that. I'm not talking nuclear, that we have the ability to do that, and that we would actually seriously consider it. And then my last point is that our civilian leaders have to be part of this process. Because this will happen before Article 5. This will be happening before the whole process gets going. So there will be a transition from national self-defense to, you can be sure the United States is here, we will be part of this. So there'll be a transition, and our civilian leaders have to have practiced that and thought through what they'll be asked.
In other words, this is the kind of integration of air and missile defense, not only within the armed forces, but one that expands into or before the conflict or crisis enters the hot phase.
Yeah, I mean, air defense, I almost wish we didn't have the D in there because it causes us to think about defense, when in fact we have to think in terms of offense, defense, protection, passive and active measures that we do, and it won't be a crew on a weapon system looking up in the sky and shooting down one rocket. It may be a sensor that sits on a hilltop in Turkey or on a Danish ship out in the Baltic Sea that is part of the recognition network, the sensor network, to headquarters that are somewhere in Germany that are probably drowning in cyber. And then you've got launchers that are either on Aegis cruisers or maybe they're fixed-wing aircraft. And of course, you've got AWACS, and hopefully, who's coming after AWACS? I hope somebody is working really hard on the what will replace NATO AWACS. That's the integrated part. And of course, in perfect conditions, it is very hard to make all those things, those systems talk to each other. In a contested environment, it will be almost impossible. So that's why you have to practice it. And you have to do what General Andreyshak did. You have to train to failure to find out where those gaps are.
And luckily we see this training happening during the Defender Europe series of exercise, during Astral Night series of exercise, etc. But since you've touched on that, one element of air and missile defense debate that always emerges when we talk is the A2AD concept, because when you talk launchers and left of launch options, you end up with the opposing battery sitting somewhere, and you need to find it. You need to drop your munitions on it. You need to break through this A2AD bubble. This concept has been, something like a myth of Russian capability. We've been through the discussion about it for a couple of years now. What do you think? What is the current understanding of this Russian capability?
Well, first of all, the pictures that all of us have seen now for the last few years, when you talk about A2AD around Kaliningrad or around Crimea, or even down in Tartus in Syria, these rings of death that, like, there's no way you can't possibly penetrate. Well, these are just circles that indicate the max effective range of a certain system. It's not a 360 wall. And so I think that, in fact, I'm very sure that people in NATO, at SHAPE, at U.S. European Command, and Polish General Staff, and Lithuania, and so on, have thought through how would we do this to neutralize, for example, the air and missile defense capabilities that the Russians have in Kaliningrad. The number one modernization priority for the United States Army is long-range precision fires. So when we talk about multi-domain operations, it might actually be land systems enabling Air Force or maritime systems first, with non-kinetic means integrated to neutralize those systems that are sitting there in Kaliningrad, for example.
General Ben, thank you for this. And just to add, an MTDF, multi-domain task force element, has just been placed in Germany, where you live. Let me now switch to our Polish ground, and actually it is a very timely event today because we are just consuming the effects and the scale and scope of a huge modernization program that has been announced just a month ago. The decision has been made to procure a short-range air defense system called NAREW, and to integrate it with the medium-range air and missile defense system called Wisła. And I'm so happy that we've got among us a man who is actually leading the effort, Colonel Michał Marciniak. You have been busy for the last few years with the upper tier of Poland integrated air and missile defense. Now you've been given a task to add up the basis for it, the foundation for it, which is the very wide-reaching SHORED system. Tell us about how are you going to do this?
Yes, good morning. Yes, still good morning. Yeah, I was extremely busy with Wisła program, and right now I will be just more busy because we need to connect to tires, and the task I received is to create integrated air and missile defense system. And we've heard a lot of meanings of integration during our panel. And I think that, first of all, we should define what does it mean and what the integration means from the politics, what for the very high military HQs, what does it mean for the operational forces. And I would like to present our meaning, I mean myself and my office meaning of the integration. And that's, I will use, Marek, you to present it. Let's imagine that myself and you, we are two separated air defense systems. With our brains, means command and control systems, we can speak, so the communication is here, and we have assets. I have my eyes to see something, and I have my hands to do something. And you have the same. Maybe the brain is different. And in our meaning of integration, on the very low level, and we call it interoperability, is that we can talk each other. And I will ask you I will tell you, this is the table. On the table, there is a bottle of water. Just take the bottle of water. Okay, that's all. So it means that our communication was connected only with the shared information, that I could see that the same table, I could see somewhere the same bottle, and I didn't engage you which hand you should do this, how you should do this. This is the interoperability, the lowest level. The system we are building in Poland right now, I mean the Wisła and NAREW system, we are going a little levels up. I mean, we are going to have full integrated air and missile defense system. What would be the difference in our experiment? I mean, close your eyes. We have the same brains. Our communication is to exchange the common air picture, and with your closing eyes, using my eyes, I will force your hand, left hand, because I know that your right hand is busy. I will force your left hand and point you where is the bottle exactly on the table and pick the bottle up. This is the full integration. I don't have, I will not have separated systems with their own sensors, launchers, or whatever. We can use aircraft as a remote launcher or remote sensor. So this is the fully integration we are working on, and I do believe that during next couple years, we will be able to present how it works. It's, of course, the 22nd century for air defense systems, but this is what we are looking for. That's my, I will come back to my previous words. We need to define what the integration means on the different levels, because create such type of the system all over the NATO is almost impossible, because create the cloud of the information all over the Europe plus the other countries would be impossible. But the question is, do we need it? Does the high military HQ need it, or put it on the regions and let them work? So this is it.
Yeah, I would like to ask you for a little bit deeper explanation. What makes this integration happen? What is required to not only link those systems, but to make them understand each other?
Yes, first of all, we are talking about a centric network. This is the answer almost for everything. And having this solution and the proper command and control system, the next important issue is communication. We need to share the information. Having in mind the electronic threats, of course, sending information via radio could be jammed, but in the systems we have to variety possibilities to exchange this information. So this is the answer. What will give us capability to have exact the same information, exact in the same point. Because interoperability is the common air picture. Everybody knows what is going on. But no one can use the other assets if I don't control this asset. So this is the answer for this question, I hope.
And when will it actually happen? I mean, of course, the decision makers have presented some ideas about the timing of the implementation of the integrated air and missile defense in Poland, but I know that you have more specific deadlines, and actually, probably within a year, we will start seeing some elements of the system arriving in Poland.
Correct. We are building this system from the starting with the Wisła, because in our Patriot system, we are trying to add to the Patriot system Polish sensor from the SHORAD, the Bystra sensor. It means that it will allow me to see the objectives I couldn't see using the Patriot sensor. So this is the first step. The second one will be add and integrate, of course, integrate by our meaning, the effectors, additional sensors, like the early warning sensors, P18PL, for example. And I really do believe, I'm more than sure, that we should see the effects of our work in 2026 during the test on the range with the fully integrated air and missile task force from the Polish armed forces.
Which will be the first element of the entire system to be built.
Yes, once we prove that it works, it means that the rest elements of the system will be just duplicate and delivered directly to the users.
So even more exciting times ahead of us. And I guess one of the people who will be watching very closely with fingers crossed is General Dinsky, who will actually be at the receiving end of the process. He is probably one of the happiest men in the Polish military, because he is waiting to get his hands on this very capable system. General, can you tell us about the capability of the integrated air and missile defense as you think about it?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is the assessment of my feelings. I expect that in the next year and next couple of years, I will be so happy commander of the 3rd Air Defense Brigade. Why? And it is not just the perception that as a commander is, used to be very happy from the soldiers that he is commanding. However, the capabilities which my brigade will deliver to the defense system. As it was stated by Colonel Marciniak, the building of the integrated, multi-layered, networked air defense and missile defense system is the top priority to my unit. This top priority comes from the NATO, the deterrence and defense concept, the deterring of the Euro-Atlantic area. This comes from the strategy, military strategy of Poland. As last year in May, President Duda issued a national strategy in which we had received the very direct task to build air defense and missile defense capabilities. This is task given to the Polish armed forces, going along with the military concept of the NATO issues to 2019. So all those efforts are fulfilling the situation why we are successful in the NATO. We are successful simply due to the fact that NATO is adopting and is able to adopt to those challenges. Those challenges, as depicted by Ms. Stefanova, thank you for bringing up to our attention what is going on the eastern border, eastern flank, southern flank, Mediterranean. Yesterday, during one of the panel, as Chief of General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces, General Andrzejczak, asked controversial question from the military perspective. There is a eastern flank, there is a southern flank. Where is the front? Where is the front? And by my perception, air and missile defense capabilities, currently it is the front. It is those capabilities which NATO right now is not fully placing. And I am so glad and I am so happy that as Poland, with the modernization process of the Polish Armed Forces, is supporting NATO capabilities, building as the integrated air and missile defense capabilities, defending not only Poland, defending the whole NATO countries. And I would like to recall the first day of Polish membership in the alliance, as March 12, 1999. From the first day of our accession to alliance, we provided with the means, with those capabilities, all to protect and to defend NATO, with QRA assets, with conducting air policing missions over 3 Baltic states, as a sequence of rotation at Šiauliai, as air base in Lithuania, as Amari in Estonia, and this year as our fighters were sent to protect the airspace over Iceland. Our radars continuously supporting air defense, providing as a recognized air picture. As air defenders, ground-based air defenders are on the post, providing the situational awareness to the air component command headquarters and structures. So we did it as a Poles from the very first day of our accession to NATO. And right now, with the procurement of Patriot, advanced capabilities, equipped with PAC-3 MSE as missiles, we are delivering another highly and the best systems which is available on the world. In addition to those efforts, I would like to bring to your attention the procurement of the 5th generation of the fighter, F-35, and it is what I am recalling at the end, placement of the integrated air and missile defense battle command system, IBCS. The command system which allow us, the users, from the tactical level to do what was depicted by Colonel Marciniak, interoperability. Any sensor, best shooter. Shooter or effector could be delivered by the Polish Navy, frigates, which will be very soon on the Baltic, the F-35 or Patriot system. All those capabilities, any sensor, best effector, those are the most demanding situation and that we are challenging right now with the placement of those. And very quickly, I understand, yep, but the time, as Mr. D'Antonas introduced the non-material as a portion of our efforts, how to place in the front and to support those material things. The training, doctrine, preparations of the personnel from the low level to the middle and to the decision makers, to support them with capabilities that we will deliver, and we will deliver those very soon.
Thank you, General. And I'm actually very glad that you've mentioned the frigates, because based on stated requirements, they will actually serve as a moving sea-based air and missile defense assets, adding to both the ISR and effector capability. We've got less than 15 minutes till the end of the panel, and I'm ready to take questions from the audience, and I'm sure, you know, to such distinguished panel, there will be many questions. We can, of course, continue the discussion, you know, for many hours, but I'm trying to see if there's. Oh yes, there is a question from Tomek Smora in the front row. My idea is to allow as many questions as you have, but please be brief so that we end within time.
Sure, Mark, thank you. My question is to Madam Stefanova concerning NATO ballistic missile defense. As we know, it was established in 2010 and it reached initial operation capabilities in 2016. But as we all know as well, it was implemented, it was created against the threats from the Middle East, especially from Iran. With, of course, American contribution as EPAA. We are closer and closer to reach final operation capabilities. And as we see in the NATO summit communique last one, on the one hand, it emphasized that the Russian missiles capabilities are more and more threatening for the whole transatlantic community. On the other hand, we saw in the communique that the NATO BMD capabilities are directly not against the Russians' the missiles. So, as you are inside in the NATO HQ, how do you see the talks? You know, do you have some insight? How, if you consider somehow to change the NATO approach and include somehow Russia within the ballistic missile defense? And only second short question to all the panelists. We know that missile threats, the spectrum is wider and wider. We've got ballistic missile threats, we've got cruise missile, right now we've got hypersonic threats. So in the next 10 to 20 years, which kind of threat you consider as the most important from the integrated missile defense point of view? Thank you.
Radoslav.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'm glad you asked it because there continues to be a lot of confusion, including actually in expert communities, about the BMD mission as opposed to the IMD mission. So let me try to untangle it if I can. So the NATO BMD mission is a peacetime mission. It is based on assets donated through the US European phased adaptive approach, but also Turkey and Spain and Romania contribute with different capabilities. Yes, we're moving towards full operational capability, hopefully very soon. And this was indeed originally designed in 2010 to fend off threats coming from outside the Euro-Atlantic area, in particular threats coming from the Middle East. This political and operational specification of the system hasn't changed. It is designed technically to deal with missiles coming from farther away than those from Russia. And it's not intended, in fact, and not therefore not capable to deal with Russian ballistic missiles. For that, there are other capabilities. And for that, we have integrated air and missile defense, where we use all kinds of capabilities at 360-degree approach, as I said, against all air and missile threats, including those from Russia. So it's important to make the distinction. That system is, and we've said this to the Russians many times, all the way through 2010. Of course, they choose not to believe us, but that's fine. That this system simply is technically not intended, or it doesn't have the capabilities to deal with their strategic deterrent. It doesn't. Those principles were most recently upheld again at the latest summit. I don't foresee that changing. Does that mean that we are somehow vulnerable to the evolving Russian missile capabilities? And they have evolved, in particular, over the last several years, and I mentioned some of them before. No, we have other means to deal with them. I hope that's clear.
And the second question that Tomek asked to me seems very interesting. The future mix of threats, and how do we see the danger of it? Because we, as Tomasz said, we have ballistic, classic ballistic missiles. We have cruise missiles of many kinds. We have hypersonic weapons, which, by the way, can come in the form of hypersonic glide vehicles shot by ballistic missile, or super fast cruise missiles moving in the atmosphere. And of course, we've got a plethora of these loitering munitions and drone munitions, which are, literally almost invisible to the current sensors. So, the threat spectrum is expanding probably faster than the defense spectrum. Who of you? General, maybe the general's here.
Hodges? Okay. Per the air defender perception, the most important is how to keep the superiority of the air power. If we will lose the possibility to keep air superiority over our land, we will lose the war. So it is the most important fact. So how to build and keep air superiority, it is in the terms of multi-domain operations, joint operations. It is the synergy effect delivered by each component. So those three components, which are classical, as land, as air and navy, and those two as space and cyber as capabilities. And per those requests, the most important is to protect the points which has to be defended from the saturated attack. So the sum of the ballistic, air-breathing threat, and as a cruise missile is the most threatening situation.
For me, it's the combination of all of these things. So I would agree with much of what Casimir has just said, but it's not going to be individual rockets or missiles or aircraft that are coming. It's going to be swarms of drones going after sensors. You remember, it wasn't that long ago that the Russian ambassador to Denmark said publicly to the Danes, hey, if you put any sensors on any of your ships to be part of some sort of NATO air and missile defense network, you are going to be a nuclear target. I mean, this was not some knucklehead in his mother's basement. This was the ambassador with that kind of a threat. But we have to have sensors on Danish ships and on Polish ships in the Baltic Sea that would be part of this network, because so many sensors will be lost, I think, in the first hours, because they'll all be targeted either by drone or strike or non-kinetic. So we have to have have layers, obviously, as well as depth of these sensors to be able to defeat these systems in their opening hours of what we're talking about. Before this is a NATO thing, this is going to be Poland, US, Lithuania. I do worry about who's protecting the Baltic Sea. The US Patriot Battalion, for sure, will be consumed protecting Ramstein. It'll take the whole battalion to do that. Our allies in Estonia and Latvia would really be hard-pressed to afford high-end medium-range, medium-altitude systems. Lithuania has NASAMS. Sweden is just now getting Patriot. But this is not enough to cover the whole Baltic. And so when we talk about burden sharing, I think this is where Germany and the Netherlands could really step up and take on a much larger role, providing protection for our allies and partners in the Baltic Sea.
And this is probably the moment that we need to accept the reality that, you know, whatever air defense we actually can afford will never be 100% tight.
Well, for sure. And even if we had exercised every month, there will be losses. I mean, the other side gets to vote too, and they're going to come at us in a way that is real damaging effect. So we have to assume that we're going to suffer losses and can still protect our citizens.
Do we have any more questions
Mark,
from the audience?
sorry,
Oh, there is the question. Yeah.
Mark, I'm sorry,
Wojtek.
can I just jump on this last point that you made very quickly? It's true, but that's not the point. Sorry, it's not the point, because as I mentioned, air and missile defense has to be seen in a continuum of other capabilities, offensive and defensive. Yes, no one has everything to defend every inch of their territory at all times, all the time, everywhere. Also, not our adversaries either. This is not the point. We have other means to defend from systems like the new hypersonic missiles. And some of them, as I mentioned earlier, need to be deterred. And it's probably not a wise investment to try to defend effectively against them. And there are many reasons for that. Costs, among other things, technical precision. We need to find out exactly more about the hypersonic weapons. And there's an ongoing effort, actually, at NATO to understand their impact on strategic stability. But the point is that air and missile defense is one of several capabilities that we have to ensure the effective defense of our territory. Deterrence is another.
And it is, of course, another dimension of the integration.
Absolutely.
Wojtek.
Hello. Wojciech Łuczak, I'm a defense expert and the vice president of Altair Group. With great respect, I received the words of Colonel Marciniak about 2026 as a this is what I understood as a margin or the border time and date for the first exercise trial of the Polish, let's say, integrated short range and the middle range missile and air defense. can you please provide us some more details? Is that properly? I understood that this is a border date of achieving some capabilities of integration in Polish and missile defense. This is the first. And the second, do you also consider in building Polish integrated missile and air defense also the new threats like those which were emerged during the Karabakh campaign, loitering munition, which is also a very important threat right now? Thank you very much.
Okay, answering for the first question, the year 26 is connected strictly with the capability of development and the building elements which will be integrated. Because what we are building right now, we are building air defense based on the Polish solutions. As you could see in the Wisła program, we bought from the States using FMS contract only elements we have to buy. The rest is the Polish one. Right now we are building the rest of the equipment like MCCs, the shelters, whatever. So having in mind that in the narrative we will transfer the huge portion of the knowledge of the technology to Poland, we need some time to build it. And the question we have right now is if our industry together with MOD is ready to provide it, to do these tasks in 2026, we are ready. And of course, we have to do this outside of the country because of the range and because of the different scenarios we are going to go. So this is the answer. And the question, the second one was? Yeah, it depends on the other words. In the final squadrons we are going to build, air defense, integrated air defense missile squadrons, will have elements to fight with the light elements, light threats. But I would like to come back to the question Marek asked about the levels of the threats. From my opinion, I think that the biggest threat is the missiles. I'm original from the Air Force, and from the pilot perspective, I wouldn't like to fly over the zone where any kind of air defense exists. So we should focus on the missiles. And to be honest, the speed doesn't matter, because the missile has to land somewhere. So if we will not follow the missile for the Mach 8, Mach 10, but we will wait for them.
Thank you. We've run out of time, and although we could probably spend the rest of the day debating all the details and all the threats and all the measures, we need to end not to consume any more of your time. Thank you very much for this. This is a continuous discussion, and we will continue next year on Warsaw Security Forum and elsewhere. Radosława Stefanowa, Ben Hodges, Kazimierz Dyński, Michał Marciniak, thank you so much.